before you to give the message for today. And the message is a timely message that God has laid upon my heart. If you are rich and have no problems, then this message is not for you. If you are perfect, if you're flawless, if you've never gone through anything, this message is not for you. If you are a person who is so far up the food chain or the pedestal, and you are just on cloud 9, and nothing will ever happen to you in your life, this message is not for you. But let me describe who this message is for. In 2020, we have faced so many problems and so many issues that the world is just in such a dreary mode that we don't know what to do. But there is a remedy for that. When you look at Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, this is what the Lord wants to tell the world today. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. The message that God has given to me to give to you today, God is still your answer. Here we are, starting a year 9 months ago called 2020, and everybody was excited and everybody was looking forward to it. And all of a sudden, things start happening one right after another. Murder of innocent people going up, crime going up, joblessness, homelessness everywhere. People losing their jobs, people losing their minds, people losing their lives. Racial, social bias and injustice in a political system we call democracy. Your loss of comfort has been shaken. Your loss of peace has been shaken. Your loss of joy has been taken. Facing all these issues and all these problems inside of the middle of this whole grand scheme of things. On top of that, the educational system has been rocked. The medical profession has been rocked because of an itty-bitty disease called coronavirus. And even in the midst of that, we are dealing with the disruption of our government because of everything happening in the White House and all over the world. If you have experienced any of that, if you are broken, if you are downhearted, if you are shaken, if you are fearful, if you are just hurting and in pain and don't know what to do, if you are suicidal, if you are confused, then this message is just for you. God is still your answer. Coronavirus has developed this word that I like to call disconnected. Everywhere you see disconnection all over the place. Some of you out there feel disconnected as a senior citizen because you feel lonely and abandoned by your loved ones, whether you're in the rest home or not, because your loved ones or your children don't come see you as much as you think they should because the virus has affected that. Single men and women who are already living by themselves or not involved in a relationship don't know how to handle the virus, and you feel disconnected socially because of the social distancing. Disconnected in the educational system where teachers and students are disconnected from each other because the house has become the normal classroom and virtual learning is now your teacher. Churches disconnected from faith and disconnected from fellowship and disconnected from worship because you can't come into the building to have service and you don't know what to do. Pastors disconnected from the flock because the flock is reaching out to them for answers to their fears that pastoral leaders all over this country, they themselves have. And here we are as blacks feeling disconnected to be equal because of the people that should be protecting us are murdering us, and we feel disconnected. Homeless people, oppressed people, poor people feeling disconnected because they feel like they are invisible in society. Spouses being disconnected from spouses that they live with under the same roof because you don't know how to cope with your marital issues. Families disconnected from each other because you can't go visit each other or you can't travel. Parents feeling disconnected and inadequate to help their children educationally because the homework that they have is over their head and they can't do it. And here we are in a nation, in an America, where we as citizens feel disconnected from a government because we have a leader who is disconnected from reality. When you become disconnected, you may be feeling disrupted, disillusioned, disengaged, disoriented, dismayed, discouraged, pure disgusted on top of your disconnected because you sit here and wonder how in the world with all this going on in my life, in my home, in my community, in my church, how in the world do you expect me to not feel disconnected from a God who I blame for all of this? If you feel that way, I am here to tell you today, God is still your answer. No matter how you want to put it, He is still your answer to all of it. When we look at Matthew 11, there's 3 steps that you need to take if you are willing to step out on faith to find relief to your problem. Step number 1 comes from verse 28, where it says, "Come unto me." That is an action word. That's a verb. That means you actually have to do something. So when the Lord is saying, "Come unto me, give me a chance," that means you have to get up off your soapbox, get up off that bed you keep laying in and day out because you're depressed. Get away from the Kleenex box that you have been using all year long because you feel sorry for yourself. Get off the pity pot. Get out of the drug house. Get away from the ABC store. Get away from all these other things that you think is your answer. And come to God, because that's the only answer you have to fix your problem. Step number 2. Take my yoke upon you. There are 2 yokes that the Bible speaks of. Paul describes one in the New Testament called the yoke of bondage. When you don't know God, when you are going through, you place a yoke of bondage around your shoulders, around your neck, on top of everything you're already battling. If you were to Google or to look up in Webster what a yoke is, A yoke was made out of wood for the most part, and it was an instrument that had two holes, and they would put it through the neck on top of the shoulders of the animal, and it would lead them down the field where the farmer needed them to go. And the other purpose of the yoke was to protect the muscles and the bone of the animal so he would not get hurt while carrying the weight of the load that he had behind him. When you don't know God and you're dealing with all this stuff, or even if you know God and you're losing your faith and you're losing your grip through all this stuff going on in the world, drugs can become your yoke. Alcohol, that's a yoke of bondage. Confusion over your sexual identity, that's a yoke of bondage. Hypocrisy, yoke of bondage. Double-minded, unstable, yoke of bondage. Murder, robbing people, yoke of bondage. Being depressed, yoke of bondage. All these things that you go through or that you choose to do just to take away your pain is a yoke you're putting on yourself to try to resolve your issue when God is still your answer. Now, when you look at verse 29 and he says, take my yoke upon you, he's not talking about the yoke of bondage that you are experiencing right now. He's talking about his yoke of submission to his will. He wants to be able to protect you from the hurt and the pain that you're feeling with your load, but he can't do it until you take his yoke, until you humble yourself and submit yourself to his power, to his will, to his word, to his way, in order to cope and handle your problems more effectively. When you take on this yoke of submission from God, it is not a yoke that is going to take all your problems away right then. It's not how it works. Then we move on, and I'm going to tell you how the yoke works in a minute. But we move on to step number 3. Learn of me. You can change that word of to from, where it says learn from me. You can change that word of to maybe a word like learn about me. But whatever word you place in there, it means the same thing. You have to get to know God. You have to build a relationship with him. It's amazing to me, as humans, we can learn our school lesson. We can study what you got on at church and talk about it to the point where we know the color of your shirt, your skirt, your tie, your shoes, and even what color slip you got on if we look hard enough. We can study your attitudes, and we can study the news, and we can learn what Trump is doing to where we know what other lies he's going to tell before he even lies say it. We can learn everything in the world, but it is so hard for the world to take the time out and learn about God. In order to learn about God, you have to pick up his word. In this word, it tells you how he operates, how he thinks. You learn what makes him tick. You learn what makes him mad. You learn what makes him angry, what makes him frustrated, what makes him happy, what makes him sad. You learn about your future. You learn about your past. You learn about your present. You learn about his blessings for you. You learn about his judgments and warnings to you if you disobey. You learn about who he is. You learn about what he is. You learn about his character. You learn everything you need to know about him so he can teach you everything you need to know about life, including how to handle your situation, which is your burdens. God is still your answer. Getting high for 5 minutes is not your answer. Because when that high is gone, that burden is still there. Laying up with somebody is not your answer, because when that is over, your burden is still there. Alcohol and all this stuff that you're doing, that's not your answer, because the issue and the pain is still there. Yes, God can change this world right now, and he can take all this stuff away right now. He can take the virus away. You don't need no vaccine. He can take away the leadership in the White House if he wanted to. He can take away the joblessness, the homelessness. He can take away every bit of it. But sometimes God sits back and he puts us in situations, sometimes to get our attention, sometimes to make us change our ways, sometimes because we reap what we sow, sometimes because we bring the burden on ourselves, sometimes it's just to see if you are willing to change by coming to him and giving him your life. Now, I want you to understand, these 3 steps lead you to God, and they lead you to happiness and peace. That's that rest he's talking about in 28 and 29 when he said, I will give you rest. I will give you rest unto your souls. That's that peace, that joy, that happiness, that comfort, that sigh of relief, that peaceful night's sleep, that comfort that you're looking for. Because that's what the world is looking for. You're looking and seeking everywhere and in every place except in the one place that can give it to you. God is still your answer. So, you come to God, that's step 1. You exchange your yoke of bondage. You're willing to give up your way of thinking, your way of living, your way of doing, your way of resolving your own issues, your way of everything, in order to take on his yoke of submission, to submit to his will, doing what he tells you to do, even if you don't like it or agree with it, going where he tells you to go, even if you don't know where it is, doing what he says in order to solve your issue. And then step 3, build a relationship. Get to know him. So you've done all that, and then you take a look at verse 30, and it blows your mind. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. The key word there is burden. Nowhere in this Bible does it say, once you give your life to God, you're never going to be sad, you're never going to cry, you're never going to have problems, you're never going to have trials, you're never going to have tribulations or storms. Nowhere does the Bible ever tell you that. So if I give my life to God, Minister Tammy, why can't I stay like I am if I'm going to still have issues? I mean, you're sitting here telling me to believe in a God that I don't see, to believe in a God I can't feel, to believe in a God I can't touch, to take away all this stuff I'm going through. When I'm broken, I'm broke, I'm disgusted, I'm confused, I'm irritated, I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I'm absolutely, totally out of my mind, almost, Miss Tammy, suicidal, and you are sitting here telling me, on top of that, give my life to God and I'm going to still have burdens? What's the point? Well, I'm going to tell you, not what's the point, but I am going to share with you what is the difference. When you stay where you are, your burden becomes heavier and heavier, which is why you're feeling the way you are. But on the Lord's side, with the burden, you have peace. You can take a punch from life and keep it moving, as if you don't even feel it, or even if you don't even see the bruises of it. There's plenty of examples in the Bible where God gives us of the difference of being on his side and being in the world, with how to deal with your burdens. You think about Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel was a man and a prophet of God, but he still had to go in the den. Joseph was a dreamer and a man of God, but he still had to go in the prison. The Hebrew boys were servants of the God of Israel, but they still had to go to the fiery furnace. Jonah was a preacher, but he still had to go in the bottom of the belly of that whale. John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin, but he still had to be beheaded. Jesus, the Son of the living God, was God Almighty, but he still had to get crucified on that cross. What's the point of me telling you all of that? Let's examine that. Daniel in the lion's den. When you stay like you are in the world, and you get thrown into the den of life, and you got all these lines of issues around you, you are going to get bit, devoured, and destroyed every single time. When you're on the Lord's side, you may go in that den, but you will come out victorious, and the lions that are trying to destroy you, and I'm talking about your burdens, will never even bite you. They will not destroy you, and you can still take it with a smile. When you are in the world, like Joseph, in a situation like he was, where he went to prison being falsely accused by Potiphar's wife for something he did not even do. When you're in the world and get in the prison of your thinking and your mental captivity and your depression and all your addictions and all this confusion that and turmoil that you have, you stay in the prison. You never get free when you don't give your life to God. That's why your prison cell seems like it's closing in on you day by day in your mind. But when you're on the Lord's side, and you get put in the prison, God will do you just like Joseph. He will take you from the prison to the palace, which means he will elevate you once you come out spiritually in him. When you look at the Hebrew boys who were thrown in the fiery furnace, in the world, you will have these emotional fires breaking out all over the place and all these problems. If you don't know God, if you don't have God, and if you don't deal with your issues the right, healthy, spiritual way, you will get burnt by the flames of life every single time. But when you know God, God will walk with you through the fire and trials of life, my brothers and sisters. Not only will he walk with you, but he will bring you out of the fire and you won't even smell burnt. You'll never even feel it. People won't even see that you were burnt through the fire they saw you go through. That's the beauty of dealing with your burdens when you know God. Jesus stood and was nailed on that cross, crucified, humiliated in front of a world that hated him. The same world that he died to save. When you don't know God, you may be feeling crucified. You may be feeling lied on. You may be running from something like Jonah was when he wanted to run from what God was telling him to do. You may be feeling broke. All this other stuff that you feeling all messed up and don't know what to do. That's your crucifixion. If you don't know God, then you will continue to be crucified over and over and over by life and never come out of it. But when you know God, we can be crucified all day long like sheep before the slaughter. And we come out the grave that life thinks they're going to bury us in, and we rise above it because we know God. And why do we know God? Because we came to him and we realized God is still your answer. It's not in what you feel. It's not in what you think. It is all in God. And I understand. I get it. You're tired of sermons that keep telling you to go to the Lord. You're tired of hearing preachers tell you, go to God. You are tired of Christians telling you, well, all I know to give you is the word. You are so tired of hearing that. Well, guess what? We tell you that because it's the truth. God is still your answer. If you're in a broken marriage, God can fix that. If you're in a situation where you are so tied to the brick and the mortar of a church building, and you are losing your grip on your spirituality because you don't know how to deal with it, go back on your knees. Tell God to help you and renew and restore unto you the joy of your salvation. Because the church is not the building. And I truly believe that God is using this day and hour with Corona to teach his people all over the world. Number one, we ain't in control of nothing. All the plans I even made for my own life this year, 2 trips, one to Washington, D.C. that I planned to go to Locke Carey, a missionary convention, one to Hampton, Virginia, to a ministers' alliance. Put it on my calendar, October, way 2019. God had to show me, you don't control nothing. Didn't go to neither one of them. Couldn't. Yes, this is an uncertain time for everybody. Yes, this is a critical hour we are living in. And yes, there are fears, internal, mental, emotional, spiritual fears that the whole world is facing. But we have to still understand that there is a God that is still on the throne. There is a God that is still almighty.